Hello, it's John Heaton, and this evening I'm going to be reviewing the George Harrison album, Extra Texture. So I'm going to be reviewing this album, George Harrison's Extra Texture from 1975. And it's an album that is not that popular amongst fans, even amongst George fans. I have a confession to make. I did pick this album up for £1 in a bargain basement at the local record shop in Wimbledon in about 78, 79. But it's an album which I come back to quite often, and it has some nice moments on it. First thing to say is the title Extra Texture is quite neat because this blue writing is in smooth texture, and then the orange is in kind of bubble texture, and the Hare Krishna sign as well there, and the same on the back. And I like the packaging on this album. He was a bit defensive because he said, "Oh, not him again," on the inner sleeve. Nice picture there from the 74 tour. And then more humour in the packaging on the record. We got the apple core instead of the full apple there. This was more or less the last solo album to be released on Apple. I think Karen Tyler made the point that it was as if George listened to the album, found it a bit depressing, and said, "Let's inject some more humour into the packaging." Well, maybe that's true, but it's quite nice packaging. The cover obviously is a bit plain and not that memorable, but it's not a bad idea. And one of the reasons I did this review is because in London the other day I picked up this copy of Extra Texture, which has the original cutout letters there, and it's not in brilliant nick, and actually one of the letters is partially torn, so I had to kind of mend it, but it wasn't too expensive. And I know you guys in the US are used to this, but I've never, in all these years, I've never seen that version physically in the flesh, as it were, so I had to get it. So this album was the follow-up to Dark Horse, which hadn't done terribly well, particularly in the UK, and the singles hadn't done terribly well either, and he kind of released this fairly quickly within kind of 9 months of Dark Horse, as if to say, okay, right, this is my latest, forget about Dark Horse, let's get on with the next one. And I think this album did slightly better commercially, and he was making more effort in terms of the arrangements. I think obviously his voice had recovered from the Dark Horse with an A period, and the tribulations of that tour, which I think George found a bit tiring. But he would still look back on this album, on the whole period surrounding this album, as depressing. His voice is, as I say, recovered, and there's some kind of string arrangements on this album which I think are a kind of attempt to make it more commercial. Some of it works, some of it not so much. I'll get to that when I go through the tracks, but the opening track, You, is probably as good as anything on this album or the previous album. In fact, it's one of George's pretty much classic solo tracks, in my opinion. It's a little bit high for him to sing. He originally wrote this for Ronnie Spector, and I think she recorded it, but it never got released. And he just took the backing track and overlaid his vocal, and hence you see the musicians on this album. You've got slightly different musicians on this track, like Jim Gordon is playing the original drum part, Carl Radle on bass, Leon Russell on piano, and Jim Keltner's kind of overdubbed a second drum part. And I like the production, I like the joyous nature of this song. I seem to remember Karen Tyler slagged it off as usual, but I think it's a really strong opener to the album. I should be showing you this one really, because it's more interesting. So the next song is The Answers at the End, which starts off quite promisingly with a quote from Sir Frankie Crisp, who owned Henley-on-Thames, Friar Park, home of George's. "Scan not a friend with a microscopic glass. You know his faults, now let his foibles pass. But very nice philosophical lines at the beginning. Life is one long mystery, my friend. Live on, the answer's at the end. So the first couple of minutes are pretty good. Unfortunately, this song goes on, don't have, 5.5 minutes. So it kind of overstays its welcome, and this is one of the examples where the string arrangement is not too successful in my opinion. I don't think the song is worthy enough of that kind of lavish treatment. It's not like a classic ballad by any means, but it's kind of inoffensive. It just goes on about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes too long. Then we get this guitar, Can't Keep From Crying, which was obviously a kind of follow-up to While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and although if we're honest it's not in the same league, I think melodically it's a great track, and the musicianship is decent. The arrangement is not terrific. On the CD there's a bonus track of this song redone in 1992, I think it was, with Dave Stewart, which I think is a lot more satisfactory. But this early version, this original version is not bad. David Foster's playing piano, a little bit fussy, a little bit over fussy on his piano part. Jesse Ed Davis on guitar, who played on Bangladesh Concert and Boards and Bridges, and Gary Wright is on keyboards. And then we have a track called Ooh Baby, which is pretty forgettable. The only thing I can say in its defense is Klaus Voormann's bass line in the middle of the song is desperately trying to inject some melodicism into it, and he almost succeeds. But as a song, it's really nothing. And George obviously thought nothing of it, because he left it out completely from his I Be Mine autobiography from 1980, when he went through all his solo songs and reproduced the lyrics and said something about each song. He completely left this one off. I don't know if it was deliberate, but maybe it was, because it's not really much of a song. Then World of Stone, piano song at the end of side one, again slightly fussy, fiddly piano from David Foster. Actually, yeah, it is, yeah. Who also contributes the kind of string arrangement as well. The chorus is quite bouncy, quite nice, but it's not exactly memorable. So kind of mediocre end to side one. Then side two starts off with a reprise of the title track. Reprise of the opening track, You, instrumental, 45-second version of that, which is nice. And then Can't Stop Thinking About You. Well, Jim Keltner's on drums, and Klaus Voormann's on bass, and Nicky Hopkins on piano, Gary Wright, they're all there, but they can't really uplift this song. It's pretty mediocre again, and particularly lyrically. I mean, he's literally singing the line "Can't Stop Thinking About You" for, endless amount of times, and this album in general attracts mixed opinions amongst fans. My friend Dave Costello once said recently he thought it was George's lost soulful classic, and my other friend Mike Abbott said it's kind of beyond rescuing, because we were listening to the remastered version in the car the other day. I'm somewhere in the middle. I mean, I don't think it's awful, but I don't think it's a classic by any means. It's probably one of my least favourite of his proper solo albums, and obviously I exclude albums like Electronic Sound from that listing. So, and this song goes on too long. Can't Stop Thinking About You, 4.5 minutes. Tired of Midnight Blue, the next track, probably one of the highlights on the album. Great piano from Leon Russell, and nice groove to this track, nice musicianship, and the Duck approves. And good track, yeah, one of the highlights. Grey Cloudy Lies, the next track. Well, this song kind of shows where George was at the time. Only want to be with a pistol at my brain. So it's not as if George was suicidal, but he was pretty depressed, His marriage had split up, and although he had met by this stage Olivia, his future wife, so can't have been that depressed. And then the album finishes with His Name Is Legs, which has got some great humour from Legs Larry Smith, formerly of Bonzo Dog Doo Dah Band, and the great opening line of the song, one of my favourites, "Everything is Dinky Doo," which is probably something Legs Larry Smith used to say, I guess. And he's singing the vocals on the middle section, and I like it. It's good. This song was an outtake from Dark Horse, because it's got Andy Newmark and Willie Weeks as the rhythm section, and I read that it was actually an outtake from those sessions, but it fits well on as the ender to this album. So this album is not great, but it's not terrible. If you want me to give it a mark out of 10, I'm going to give it somewhere around a 7, I think, because it's certainly got its moments. Tide of Midnight Blue and You, the opening track, are top draw. So, thank you for watching, and greetings from City Park in Hungary. Good night.